Welcome. My name is Jerry George. I'm a professor of innovation and entrepreneurship and the deputy principal for faculty and programs at the business school at Imperial. I have here today one of our fantastic friends, Don Strickland. Don is a fabulous person. In our program, he's going to be the senior corporate mentor, but the reason he's here is he has several things to his credit. First, he was a senior executive at Apple and Kodak, and he was responsible for many things in terms of transitions in their business model. Second, after leaving Kodak, he started a new company, a Web 2.0 company, and took it public and went through the challenge of building it into a $1.6 billion enterprise. And now he's wouldn't be fair to say you're retired, because he works with senior executives in large companies based on innovation, discussions of their business model, transitions, and adapting to a changed reality in their corporate environment. Don, we have the pleasure of having Don as both an adjunct professor at Imperial and as a senior corporate mentor in our program. Welcome, Don. Can I ask you to say a few minutes about what your thoughts are on data-driven innovation, entrepreneurship, and what it means for us as both companies and as a society as we grapple with this, to see the shape of the future as well as how we think the world is going to change around us. Because you've seen a good 20 years of web, products within the web, transitions in business models, and how firms had to adapt. You've done this for over 20 years in building a company, in taking new products to the market, and also in terms of helping other companies adapt to a changed reality in their corporate environment. So let's hear your thoughts, and then maybe we can have a few questions and a little bit of discussion around it.
Well, thank you very much, Jerry. And if I could answer all those questions, I think I could write a book and be a well-known author, such as you are. I'd like to. First of all, it's a great honor and a pleasure to be here and serve as a mentor for this program, which I call the Young Leaders Program. And I'm very excited about that. And I'm also very excited about learning from each of you as I get to know you as we go through this program. I wanted to make a few remarks here this morning about data-driven innovation. And what I'd really like to focus on is the data part of that, because that's what's changed. I remember a few years ago, Jerry, when the whole world used data to do nothing more than just track progress towards metrics and also to promote efficiency. And that's what it is. Today, it's reverse. Today, data and big data is driving innovation. It's driving new companies. My company was one of those. And it's changing the way businesses and government fundamentally do business and think about their business. I read in The Economist a few months ago that 90% of the world's data has been created in the last 2 years. And that's astounding, because what it means is that all today's current technology for storing, organizing, and analyzing data is already obsolete. It's already obsolete. And new technologies need to be developed for that. And what's driving this data, and by the way, it's not just the magnitude of data, it's the diversity of data. And it's also the velocity, how much the data is changing, is being driven by a whole new world of diverse sensors. And these sensors, unlike sensors of even 5 years ago, are always connected. And they're always connected to databases. And those databases are talking to each other. So we live in a world today that we're surrounded by sensors constantly accumulating data. Now, these data sources, some are normal, like everybody knows with their cell phone. There's location-based data, and there's a tremendous amount of work being done today to analyze the information on consumer profiling you can get from location-based data. But also, recently, with the advent of connectivity for automobiles, you're seeing a whole new industry be created around telematics. And your automobiles are now a sensor. Things like the Smart Cities Initiative are producing billions of sensors all over the world. It truly is a connected place, and we're all being watched by data sensors. So far, a lot of good has been done with this big data. As I mentioned before, a lot of innovation today is driven by the data, but it's also been used to help households reduce their energy consumption. It's been used to help cities run more efficiently. It's being used to improve healthcare and so on. There are also some areas that may be a little bit controversial. For example, what we're seeing now in certain countries is your car insurance premiums are going to get adjusted on how many times you exceeded the speed limit last year. Also, you're looking at the GPS driving record on how quickly you take off from a stop sign and how quickly you brake. Also, when you look at things like health insurance, some health insurance companies are looking at going into your browsing records, and when you apply for health insurance, just go take a look and see if you've been online or browsing on things like maybe heart attack type issues and so on. There's been some innovations occurring now in terms of genetics. A lot of data is being accumulated in the area of genetics, and this data is going to be used sooner or later for who gets hired, who gets promoted, and maybe even who gets married. You never know. Some people right now are even trying to predict criminal behavior based on a person's browsing patterns and their interaction with social media sites. Now, data by itself, big data, is ethically neutral, neither good nor bad. However, this whole advent of data all around us does raise several serious legal and ethical issues for both business and for government. Things like identity. All of us I have an offline identity and I have an online identity. What is the relationship between those two? Recently in New York, a court ruled that an IP address is a not sufficient connection to an offline identity for purposes of proving copyright infringement. There are many more cases that are sorting out the connection between offline and online identity. There's issues on privacy and ownership. Who is it that has access to the data? Who owns the data? Importantly, who's able to transfer data? For example, when I pass on, can I will my Facebook page to my sons? Who owns my email account? My Twitter account? Who has access to that? These are issues that are not yet resolved. There's issues on data integrity. We have massive amount of very important data being collected. And you have to ask, how do we know that it's trustworthy? Who was making that decision? What standards did they use? How do we know that the standards were applied properly? There's issues on persistence of data. I mentioned before that when data is collected, today databases talk to databases. And today it's almost impossible to completely eliminate data. And there are also many enterprises whose business it is to archive data. For example, the Library of Congress in the United States is archiving every single tweet since 2006. That data is going to be around forever, or at least as long as the Library of Congress is. Now, this program is not aimed at giving you the answers to these questions, because there's not any one answer to these questions. They are all context sensitive. What this program does do is to give you the opportunity to work with your colleagues and some of the best and brightest thinkers in this area over the next several months. And this program is going to be a life-defining and changing experience. I hope and I expect that as you leave the program, that you'll all go back to your jobs, both in business and government, and make the world a better place for all of us. And personally, I'm very excited about seeing and meeting each of you and sharing views with you on January 18th in London. And I'll see you then. Thank you very much.
I could bring out 2 or 3 key issues that you've raised. One is the diversity of data, the use of data, and the ownership of data. These are paramount questions, and there is no right answer in any of these. I wonder how you can think about diversity of data and map it onto, let's say, entrepreneurship, or ways I could think about innovation. How do I think about diversity or use and apply it to innovation, entrepreneurship, or even about how organizations respond to customers, like consumer profiling?
Well, I look at entrepreneurship as very much a process of connecting my mind and others to other data sources than what I have in my head. So when I look at diversity of data and the access to data, and also tools to analyze data and to visualize data, to me those are all tools of the entrepreneur. And the entrepreneur that today just relies upon personal observations is probably not going to make it. It's not going to be successful. And when you look at this massive amount of data, it's no longer data that we can look at directly and make sense of. And the program is going to cover some incredible data visualization tools to where you're looking at visual representations of data. You're an expert in this area when you're looking at networks and communities and how to extract information from data based on the patterns and how a lot of people interact and go forward.
One of the challenges that I personally think about quite often is how does this have implications for emerging economies? And there is a whole, when we talk about data, people talk about M-Pesa as one example, which is very good. But it also has implications for things like digital money. And that has implications for how we conduct social transactions in life, right? So it just doesn't stop at data as an artifact, but rather data as enabling life in a different way of living. So I wonder what your thoughts are on this.
A lot. I think it gets us into, very briefly, the topic of reverse innovation, because in many cultures, there's less sensitivity to data collection. And we've become very sophisticated in Western worlds about protecting data and privacy, and I don't want anybody to know this about me or that about me, and so on. But in a lot of the emerging world, that's a foreign concept, and data is fairly freely given. That drives a lot of things like the mobile wallet and microfinancing and other new businesses, innovative business in those economies. I personally am in the camp of people that think that in the next 10 years, 20 years, the innovation that's going to matter most is not the innovation occurring in the large Western corporations. It's what's happening today in these, quote, emerging markets.
How about the social implications? We talked about privacy as an issue. What about ethics? And is there something on ethics, is a way of thinking about it? I understand it's a big, broad topic, but how would you approach this issue in terms of ethics?
I think ethics is something that is going to be the saving grace that makes data really be used for the good of the world. And to approach big data from a standpoint of ethics, to me, requires some kind of a framework, to set what are the topics and what you want to do with it. And people need to agree on that first. And that is the subject of a lot of ongoing academic research today. It's just what is the right framework from which to view the ethics of the use of data. If there is no framework for ethics, what will happen is we'll go into chaos. Everybody will apply their personal ethics to the use of data. And what will happen will lead to massive abuse, and the world will not be a better place. So I think part and parcel with the technology being developed and all the innovative and entrepreneurial fruits of big data, the ethics is just as important for that to develop in parallel to where all of that works together.
The way you describe it, it reminds me of I think it's called the Hippocratic Oath, isn't it? Above all, do no harm.
In fact, that's a good, the Hippocratic Oath for the ethics of data.
That's it. That's what we're looking for. Now, one is we talked about society, ethics, privacy as one set of issues. And I'm looking at entrepreneurship and some of the new models that are coming out in terms of how you look at either like like phone apps, right? That says how do you hail a taxi, how do you, all these things that increase convenience in our house and in how we live. And then we look at innovation, which is probably where a lot of our participants are thinking of and saying, how can I work in a large organization that has multiple products and services? How should I be thinking about it for my organization from that perspective? What are some of your thoughts, given that you work with some of the best names in the world?
First of all, it'll depend upon the specific organization and the person's job and the role in the organization. And maybe in January, I can get into more discussions with individuals on that. It's a very interesting topic. When you look at, in the context of a large company or government organization, what I think data does is allow people to extend their reach and their thought process beyond what they would if they just interacted with the people around them. And I think it allows somebody in one country to begin to understand how people in other countries think. I think it allows people that are in one business to realize that my customers in the next 10 years are not the customers I have today. My competition 10 years from now isn't the competition that I have today. You don't see it when you're kind of limited to personal observations, but when you're looking at data on what people are doing and what they're liking and how they're behaving, you can pick up these very subtle trends. And I think the successful people that use data, particularly big, diverse data, to their benefit in large companies and governments, will be extending basically their physical senses to the world's database.
On that note, on an aspirational note, to say we will conquer the world. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jerry. Very nice to be here.